and welcome to Our Voices. I am Semanyushe Koye and I'm joined by my co-host Orian Itangishakan. Hi Orian.
Hello Lily, how are you doing?
Shall I say Happy Women's Week?
Women's Month. I would say month. We're going to celebrate the whole month.
Right, this is the whole Women's History Month. But we also celebrated the International Women's Day this week on Wednesday under the theme Innovation and Technology for Gender Equity. So did anything stuck with you during this celebration, or did you do anything specific that's exciting for your service?
We did cover a lot on what women are doing, where women are celebrating this year, and especially the theme, which in my region, women were really interested in knowing more about equity in digital innovation. This is something very interesting in terms of what they can do to succeed in this field, because technology is something that requires a lot of resources, and so they're looking forward to learning more about how they can use that particular field to prosper. So yes, I did cover women in the diaspora as well, who are happy about that theme because they realized that during COVID, technology was definitely something that came through for them to be able to work from home and still just really get things done.
Yeah, I mean, the same here for our service. Mm-hmm. United Nations says that the impact of digital gap also widens the economic and social inequalities. So in light with that, we try to highlight efforts in Ethiopia to bring women, especially young women, into technology and help them, come up into the field. So I think that's why it's very important to celebrate International Day, to recognize the day, because I feel like gender equity is still an aspiration for a lot of them. And that's why we are raising one of the issues where women continue to face discrimination, which is divorce. Breaking up a marriage can be emotionally hard to do. But when it happens, the impact often falls more heavily on women. Across Africa, marriage may give women access to social and economic rights, but divorce can have them hurting economically. According to the World Bank, women frequently inherit nothing when marriage ends, and discriminatory laws and practices hinder women from claiming their rights. This is in addition to the social isolation, which very often leads to loneliness and depression. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we are looking at the impact of divorce on the well-being of women in Africa. We will also explore discriminatory divorce laws and ask experts about how women can protect themselves after a marriage ends.
Now, women activists and women groups in Zimbabwe are applauding amendment to the country's marriage law, which they say has improved on division of property in light of a divorce. Under the new Marriage Law Act of 2022, girlfriends get some inheritance right, and there is a demand for the return of the bride price or a sum of the money or quantity of goods given to a bride's family by the groom, especially in tribal society when couples separate. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
Last year, Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa signed into law the new Marriage Act, bringing much happiness to women activists. Has it made life easier for women? I put that question to Geraldine Kabaya, a divorce lawyer in Zimbabwe.
Certainly it has, because it has, in place of being very restrictive, it has opened up the space for what we call a civil partnership, which is essentially what we loosely termed cohabitation in the past, in previous law. So it has introduced use of the Matrimonial Causes Act, parts of it, to assist the court in coming up with equitable distribution, especially of property when spouses dissolve their marriage.
In the past, some Zimbabwean women have lost their property in divorce to the husband, causing anguish among women and condemnation from activists. The legal rights group Women and Law in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, says the new law still has some gaps that needs improvement, just like another law.
But however, it's not all negative. The New Marriages Act came up with aligned with the Constitution in terms of coming up with the age of marriage. It's now 18, in a bid to curb child marriages. And also it criminalizes child marriages, which is a progressive development.
Child marriages were common among religious groups before the law came into being. Now that is solved. Divorce lawyer Kabaya says it is something outstanding.
The law also speaks to protection of the interests of a spouse who is civilly married from the dissolution of a civil partnership. So essentially, the court is left with a wide discretion to choose whatever it wants to apply, whatever it wants to consider when dissolving a civil partnership, when one of the partners is also married civilly to another person. So that in itself has problems because there are no rules.
Women activists say that gives it too much leeway to the presiding judge, which may result in the woman losing in a divorce case. But they are happy with some positive changes in the new Marriage Act of Zimbabwe. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
I have no problems, Your Worship.
Thank you, Columbus, for that report. Now, divorce is not usually a smooth process. In many cases, it affects the physical, social, psychological, and economic well-being of both partners. However, the negative impact on African women can be far worse. To learn more about these aspects of divorce, we invited Nigeria-based lawyer and divorce coach Arunke Omame to the program. Ms. Omame, welcome to Our Voices.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. So, I mean, sometimes marriage might not sustain and divorce will be inevitable. But for most African women, it will be a huge economic loss. So, since you work with a lot of women going through divorce, can you tell us why women are financially impacted by divorce?
Well, I think that to a large extent, it's because the women are left to look after the children by the men after there's a divorce. Many women want to hold on to the custody of their children, and it's convenient for the man or the men to allow the woman to have custody. And because we generally in Africa, because we do not have established laws in terms of maintenance and what they call alimony. For instance, in Nigeria, we don't have alimony. The men get away with that, and then it becomes an issue of either you let him go away with it or you start debt recovery proceedings against him if he fails to pay whatever maintenance orders have been granted by the court. That's one reason why a lot of women, fail in terms of finances when they have custody of their children. Another reason is that women themselves they don't empower themselves. A lot of women believe that because he's my husband, he should do everything for me. And that is actually saying about the upper class or the middle class women more than those who are in the very low class. Those who are in the very low class, generally speaking, seem to have accepted their lot, and they seem to do a lot more work for themselves financially than those in the upper cadres.
Right, and I guess my question would be to follow to that. Do you think in nowadays time, do you think that women are more bound because economically or more culturally? Because we've known that in conservative society, culture weighs heavier than maybe even the economic part. In this time, in these days, maybe in Nigeria, what is weighing more at this time in terms of divorce?
I think that women are staying in their marriages, in their bad marriages, more from the cultural perspective rather than the financial perspective. A lot of women now are, as I said, especially in the lower cadre, they are, although you find also that in the lower cadre, they seem to be ready to get divorced faster than the women in the middle cadre. It's an ego thing. It's a social stigma, or it's regarded to be a social stigma. And so it's more of a cultural thing than a financial thing. You find out that when a woman is having difficulty with the finances for her family, for her children, she seems to find a way around it. I'm not saying that her income is great, but she seems to find a way around that. So it's more of a cultural thing for a lot of our women.
I mean, since we are talking about culture, in most societies, there is a stigma associated with divorce. In most cases, women will be blamed for failed marriages and sometimes will be even outcasted from their societies. So how does that affect their life?
Well, I think things are changing quite a bit these days. Yes, women seem to take the slack each time that, most times that a marriage has failed. First of all, I find out that women are their greatest enemies. It's the women who judge themselves. And until they wear the shoe or they wear a similar shoe, they generally tend to think that it's the woman that is at fault in the marriage that fails.
Thank you so much. We're going to continue the discussion further, but today we are discussing the impact of divorce, and we'll come back to that discussion further, especially in Africa. And with us today, we are with our guest from Nigeria who will help us. That's Arunke, who will help us more on this discussion. Arunke Omame is a divorce coach in Nigeria. Let's take a break and we'll be back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Today we are talking about the consequences of divorce on women. The World Bank says during divorce, women face a sudden drop in economic support accompanied by other legal, social, and emotional challenges. To learn more, we talked to women in South Africa about the challenges they face when going through a divorce in our Your Voice segment.
It's fair for women in Africa to just to get divorced and leave without anything. So I think what can be done is Africa must start initiating programs on how to inform women about their rights and how to inform them about different kinds of marriages and what are they entitled to when it comes to marriages, so that they cannot marry without any information.
If they are not legally married, they do not sign anything. Well, they formed a domestic partnership and they can't just walk away without anything from the partnership, you know. They can still go to court without being legally married. We call such domestic partnerships. The best thing to do is for you to work for those things if you want them. Getting married is no sin, it's a good thing actually. But work for yourself, because you don't know what that person you are married to is going to be in the next 10 years. What if they no longer want to be with you and they want nothing to do with you, they just want their things. You have, yes, you can be married, but it doesn't mean that his things are your things unless you got married and you see those communities of property and stuff.
Most women are being killed by their husband because they have nowhere to go, because they're depending on those husbands, because they are the one that provides. So just go to school, or even if you can no longer go to school, try to start a business, try to have something that belongs to you, something that you will use to provide for your children, because you will find that husband not wanting to do something with those children of yours. So you have to take care of those children. So have something for that has your name on it, not your husband's. So yeah, just work.
Welcome back. You are watching Our Voices. Now we have with us Aisha Mwazu from Hausa Service joining us to discuss more and share your perspective on divorce and its effect, especially on African women. Absolutely. What's your take on that?
For me, I feel divorce is something that has broken homes and caused a lot of havoc in the society, because children born from divorced homes end up with emotional issues. Even the women also end up with emotional issues. They are left alone to fend for themselves, because most of the times men use it as a tool to actually punish them financially. If they divorce a woman with the children, they let her take the responsibility, every single bit of it, of the children. And that leaves the woman hanging, especially for women who don't have any educational or any skills to support themselves. They have to start from the scratch. And then having to cope with children makes it even worse. And where I come from, the North, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. I had a discussion with a woman who said her parents were like, they stigmatized her, they treated her like an outcast. The society in general also treats you like an outcast because they feel you have failed to keep your marriage, not knowing exactly what transpired in the marriage. So the women end up bearing the brunt of the whole thing. And the man goes to ask for a lady's hand in marriage the next day or the next week.
So not only you suffer financial consequences, you also suffer the blame.
Emotional.
Exactly.
That's tough.
I like what you said. They are the ones who take the brunt of all the consequences that come after marriage. That's why we also will discuss now what should women do when they go through these processes. I mean, the process of divorce is a financially and emotionally challenging time for women, and they have to sustain a lot of, as Aisha said, they have to sustain a lot of financial consequences, economic consequences,
and social.
Right.
Social consequences. And then there are also children who they have to look after in addition to what they are going through emotionally.
And this is in spite whose issue was, who to blame. In terms of what happened between the two people, the two adults. Sometimes we're not saying that women aren't to blame for some of the things, because women do cheat, women do steal, women do other things that men can do. But I think that, like we're saying, the burden definitely falls on them at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
For the most part.
And then the children as well.
And the children as well. So as we say, the process of divorce is financially and emotionally challenging time for women, and some may feel like they cannot survive. Still with us is Arunke Omame to share some advice for women on how women can move on with their life after divorce. So Ms. Omame, a lot of women after divorce, they find themselves confused to resume their life, and they ask themselves, how do I get started after this? So what is your advice for them to help them know that this is not the end of the world?
Well, if you ask me, the first thing is determined to survive and to thrive. And the first thing in surviving and thriving is sit down and acknowledge to yourself what part you had in the breakup of the marriage. Because when a marriage breaks up, it's usually not 100% anybody's fault. As in, it's not 100% the man or the woman's fault. There's fault on both sides. And until women come to understand that, then of course they'll always continue to think that it's the man that caused the problem, or the man that found themselves no longer acceptable, and they don't heal. Because if one doesn't heal from a divorce, you really cannot move forward. So, of course, seek the help of friends who do not demonize your ex. You don't need it. Don't go back there. It's almost like returning to a vomit. And so it's better to just go ahead and tell yourselves, I want to move forward. It's difficult. I'm not saying it isn't. It's very difficult, but it's something that women need to do. And then, of course, decide that you must have what I call a divorce support team. That is, usually it consists of a lawyer, a financial person, a body you can talk to, and a divorce coach. These are people who will help you in moving ahead from the position you are at when you are going through divorce.
Now, Ms. Omame, what is the reality of remarriage? Because, some women may feel that this is not the end, as you said, and they want to get back into a union that they can enjoy and, have someone to grow old with. What is the reality there when they want to remarry? Do you provide them with the tools, the guidance, the advice to remarry? And what is your take on remarriage?
Well, many women will tell you when they newly divorced that they will not get married again. I don't think that it's a sustainable position to take. I think it's better to just say to oneself, well, if I do find love. But then how do you prepare yourselves to find love? First of all, you have to clarify in your mind what has happened. You have to get clarity about what has happened. You have to set goals for yourself. And I don't mean goals as in I want to find a man to marry, but I want to improve myself. You have to do like a self-audit, first of all, and say, all right, what is it that was wrong with this first one? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I have improved upon? What could I have done less of? Now you have to get yourself into becoming, as it were, a total person, a person who loves themselves. So it's when you get into that position that you are able to start to look for love. But if you sit down and say to yourself, well, my husband didn't appreciate me, I'm a good cook. Yeah, you may have been a good cook. I've been bad and been bad in bed. Mm-hmm. You may have been very good in bed. You may then again have been unfaithful in your first marriage because of financial issues.
Miss Omame,
of course, financial issues.
Miss Omame, if I may ask, you talked about healing. What is the sign that one gets to understand that he's healing, and what does one need to do to get to that point when he or she gets healing?
Well, that's what a divorce coach does for you. A divorce coach, first of all, helps you to understand what the goals are, what goal you want to reach. For instance, you might say, all right, the reason why I got divorced, which might not be a good, which might not really be the reason, but you think to yourself, all right, I need to improve my finances, for instance. I need to get out of my limiting beliefs. For instance, some people believe that, oh, I'm so bad, I'm fat, or I'm thin, or whatever it is, or I've been convicted of a crime, and so I'm not good, I'm not lovable. You need to get out of that. You need to also get to a place where you are able to understand where you want to be, who you are, how you will get there. And that is the process of healing that I'm referring to.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Omame, also when divorce happens, usually there will be children. And when there are children, you have to continue the communication with the father, with the mother. And sometimes that could be stressful or, could even cause more problem. So what's your advice on how communication should be between parents after divorce?
I say jokingly, but rarely, that the fact that you're divorced from a man, well, I'm a woman, so I'll say the fact that you're divorced from a man does not mean that he's not part of your family. He is. Because unfortunately for you, he's still the father of your children. Even when you get into another marriage, he is a consideration in your new marriage.
What about...
but relationship...
Go ahead.
But relationship... Are you saying something?
Yes, go ahead.
But the relationship between you and your ex is such that the children, their interest must always come first. That should always be top of mind. So when you are relating with your ex, don't allow your friends to demonize your ex. Don't allow your friends to say, oh, he's a bad man, or whatever it is that they will say. Secondly, remember that he has 100% access or entitlement to the child as you have. Remember that you are bringing up your child with a family or a new partner that the child would rather it was their own father that is in that relationship. And so you must be able to set boundaries as to what you do with the child, what you say to the child, what you allow the child to do, what you insist that the child must do when they're with their other parent. So for instance, if the child goes to the father for the weekend, it's not for you to call every hour to say, have you had lunch? What did you have? Because remember that you are as much a parent to that child as the other parent is.
Ms. Omame, there are people who, when they get divorced, want to jump into another marriage almost immediately. What do you suggest for such people?
I'd say don't. Until you do a self-audit, until you know exactly what you want to get into in the new marriage, it's good to desire a new marriage. But until you are sure in your mind, and if it takes one day, fine. But until you are sure that I'm getting into this new marriage, I recognize what the problems I had with my first marriage are. I understand how to overcome those problems. I don't think you should get into a new marriage.
That is Arunke Omame. She's a lawyer and divorce coach in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us. And that's thank you. I mean, that was a very good tip that we got, especially about how to raise your children after divorce. I think that's a very big, challenging thing for women, right?
Especially if they're going through the court system, because that could be a very, very messy battle. I mean, you're going back and forth. You're pulling out the worst of the other person to prove your case. And so I've heard a lot of women that's really the tough part, when you have to actually prove your case by digging up every little bit of things that he has done, to make your case, and that could be an emotional roller coaster.
Absolutely, and in the case of people who don't go through the legal process, there's this issue of trying to keep the children away from the reality, or trying to keep them in balance. Because I've had a woman who got divorced and the children kept asking, "Where's our dad?" And she said, "Your dad traveled, and it's been 2 years. The father never came back." And then they started having depression and whatnot. And having to know how to deal with that, I believe, is very key.
So not only that, also what you tell to your children about the father. You might be angry at them for whatever reason, but still they are the father of the children, right? So you should not be telling them anything negative, anything bad.
So that makes the point. We need a coach, a divorce coach, whenever situations happen, to know how to deal with things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's our show for today. Remember, we are on Facebook at VOA Africa, and our Instagram and Twitter handle is at VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp, and our number is country code +1 202 503 9025. Please join us again next week for another exciting program. Be sure to continue the conversation on our social media platforms as well. Until then, thanks for watching.